Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and recently we got a bunch of new stuff data mined both on the PTR for a classic version of World of Warcraft, but also for the retail version that confirms that big updates are on the horizon. Things such as potentially Mists of Pandaria Classic, all but confirmed as the future Classic expansion, and it seems that yes, they're just going to continue the whole Classic journey after Cataclysm, which had a lot of players wondering if they would, because the further we get into the Classic expansions, eventually Classic and retail start to seem closer and closer together. But also we got some new stuff over on the PTR for the War Within expansion that might be hinting at future almost confirmed updates for the patch 11.1, the next major update of this expansion. And that's basically what I really want to focus on in today's update. As always, if you want to see more future discussions about War Within or potentially all things Warcraft, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right into the new data mine things. So all in all, what is all the new stuff that's been recently data mined? Well, first of all, we got some new stuff for the retail version of the game, but also some stuff for the Classic. And I kind of just want to talk about the Classic really quickly because they found a brand new Shah type of a tiger and a Shah dragon mount for a recent Cataclysm Classic PTR build. Both of the mounts absolutely look insane. Likely they're going to be store mounts or potentially even some kind of pre-order mount, which we'll talk about in a second, but the mounts themselves do look incredibly good. Though no direct information or confirmation by the devs has been given as to what these mounts are going to be, but I think a lot of us can guess. With the pre-expansion, they're likely a pre-expansion reward when it comes to Mists of Pandaria Classic. And Cata Classic is approaching its final patch somewhat soon, with the Hour of Twilight, literally the final patch of that expansion, and the final raid tier of that expansion, launching sometime in January of 2025. And after Cataclysm, Mists of Pandaria comes next. Though some have assumed that maybe they might end up skipping out on Mists of Pandaria, or potentially Cataclysm could potentially be the final Classic patch, because at some point the game is actually going to start to resemble closer to retail rather than the vanilla Classic. Like comparing, let's say, Legion or Battle for Azeroth to contrasting that against literally vanilla World of Warcraft Classic was a pretty big difference between the two games. But as they get closer to expansions from Wrath into Cataclysm, into potentially Mists of Pandaria, into what comes afterwards, Warlord of Genera, and then what are we going to be playing, Legion Classic really soon? Which I personally wouldn't mind, but eventually you do end up getting to the point where it starts to feel less like Classic and closer and closer and closer to retail, so a lot of players wondered if they actually would go that far. Like, how far will this Classic journey take us until eventually we're playing War Within Classic while War Within Retail is out and about? And some have assumed with them releasing Mists of Pandaria Remix at the time, it was a great way for us to get a taste of Mists of Pandaria, but we kinda already got a taste for Pandaria with Remix, and it was like a nice way for players to get a big bulk of what that expansion was back in the day, though minus all the different class changes that came with Pandaria. But it looks like we are about to loop back and actually start making our way towards the retail version of WoW, or more modern version of WoW little by little, and it looks like Mists of Pandaria Classic is all but confirmed so far, at least as of this moment, until we get an official announcement. But outside of Classic WoW, we also get some retail stuff, like potentially a patch 11.1, hence on the PTR for the War Within, which is where I am right now, because if you walk around Dornogal right now, you'll actually find a lot more NPCs in this place, a handful of key ones, and they have quite a bit of extra dialogue about them. It could be part of the world building that they're trying to do for War Within, but this is likely NPCs placed there in particular with dialogue options, or the dialogue in between of themselves, that hints at what the next major update is going to be. Though right before that, I do want to rewind to everything we know so far about potential future updates that might come out of the War Within expansion, like patch 11.1 and 11.2. Way back in the day, we data mined that potentially Goblin and Ethereal raid items were found long ago. And some of these items even have a specific naming that does confirm that potentially these items could drop from an Ethereal raid or a Goblin raid. When it comes to Ethereals, we know that from the first raid of this expansion, Nurubar Palace, we actually get to interact for a little bit with Nexus Princess Kaiveza. And during that encounter, she is actually communicating with somebody else, another Ethereal perhaps, some kind of a master of sorts. So we're probably going to be seeing them again, especially with the Theros likely being potentially either an antagonist or maybe an ally in the future when it comes to future expansions of the World Soul Saga, such as Midnight. So an ethereal raid is possible since now we have Princess Kaiveza, who kind of opens the door into a potential raid. But also we know that Rootlands exist thanks to a book that can be found way back in the Emerald Dream, back in the expansion of Dragonflight, that describes it pretty well. And we actually might have found a possible entrance to the Rootlands located somewhere between Hallowfall and Ashkahed. There's roots that go upwards and it looks like there's a crevice, almost like a cave that continues further into a new area. But whenever you get close, your character gets knocked back to the ground. And that's likely placed on purpose just to make sure that you can explore further, because that's potentially where the Rootlands may be. And what's exciting is Rootlands actually might be the home of the Heronir, the troll elven people that they added for this expansion that we don't really know much about. They're very enigmatic, but a lot of players did fall in love with their looks and are hoping that they potentially could become an allied race, which they easily could be, since they represent the Knight of Skeleton, and that'll be pretty easy to repurpose to a playable option. But as for Dornogal, we actually have a bunch of these different NPCs scattered all over the place. And all of them talk about a crystal the goblins have found way out beyond the reaches of Kaz Algar. So somewhere not underground, but actually looks like above the surface. But the Arathi are very interested in this crystal, and so are the goblins, and they're actually banding together to create some kind of a big project. And based on some of the dialogue that we have around town, it hints at them possibly either making a zeppelin of sorts, or possibly some kind of a base of operations, so maybe an air base, but instead of being airships underground in Hallowfall, there'll actually be airships above ground instead of the core of Azeroth. So it sets up potentially either as a form of transportation or maybe another hub completely. Maybe it'll be located somewhere else where the crystal is. And there's a couple more NPCs that actually hint to us potentially exploring above ground outside of Kazalgar as our next new zone. The Earthen Dornogal also created a brand new type of troop as well. They're not quite Storm Riders, but instead they're called Storm Rangers. And if you explore a little bit more of the dialogue, spoiler here, but they're basically meant to be a fighting force of Dornogal, but are not meant to fight inside of Kazalgar, but rather looking for threats on the outskirts. Which does mean that we'll be exploring zones outside of Kazalgar, somewhere on the surface, or maybe finding an entrance on the surface that takes us deep down below. And altogether, it's very possible that we could potentially be going into 11.1 as a possible goblin-based patch, because there's actually a lot of text in-game that hints at a potential goblin zone and a goblin raid in the future. We know that goblins are going to be a decent bit of focus of this expansion because there's a whole short story that's written and focused on them specifically, and that short story focuses on Gazlowe, potentially Galawix, and their main capital city of Undermine. Undermine is not a capital city we know a lot about. All we know is it was originally the Goblin capital city, a big underground sprawling place situated under Kazan. And Kazan get absolutely obliterated by Deathwing, so we don't really know exactly what happened to Undermine afterwards. We do shortly travel to Undermine, but not exactly to it, but rather to the surface of it, back during the expansion of Battle for Azeroth in the Dungeon of the Motherlode, which actually goes to the Isle of Kazan. So we're not exactly going to the Undermine itself, but Kazan was situated on top of the Undermine, and we do travel there for a short moment, mostly to take out the leader, Mogul Razdunk, who was the leader at the time of the Venture Co. faction of goblins. But when we took out the leader, now there's a bit of a power vacuum, and one of the goblin antagonists mentioned in that short story, Galawix, is still out and about, and it's very possible he could take over the Venture Co. now that they don't have a leader since we took him out, and that could potentially set up an antagonist with a pretty big force of goblins behind him. And this crystal island that the goblins are talking about that you can hear in the rumors in Dornogal, likely related to Undermine, or potentially could be related to Undermine. This could help us set up a brand new zone and a brand new crystal for us to explore, but also maybe something that lurks under the crystal, which maybe could be another entrance to Undermine as a potential new raid of 11.1. As of right now though, that's about all the information we have, and this is everything we get to go off of, so I want to pass it up to you guys in the comments below. Would you want to see a goblin raid or a goblin inspired zone in the future, and would you want to go to the place called the Undermine to explore the capital of the goblin city, or whatever is left of it after Deathwing's destruction and after everything else that has happened thus far to this expansion? Although goblins may not be the only breadcrumb that we can go off of, we actually have another breadcrumb NPC that is currently completely encrypted, but it's a new Silver Covenant quest giver with no name given at the moment. And this one is honestly really up in the air because very little is known about this potential quest going forward, except that Blizzard doesn't want it spoiled. This is why everything right now is fully encrypted. But we do know the Varisa Windrunner has recently had some new stuff data mined in the files. Again, nothing special, we just know some changes have been done to that character specifically. And Varisa would be with the Silver Covenant, sister of Sylvanas, but also sister of Alleria, but also somebody who would be very linked to the Kirin Tor, which has had their city entirely obliterated just recently. And while the city of Dalaran completely exploded, nothing has really been talked about in terms of what about the citizens of Dalaran, what about all the people that have resided in the city, because all of them are still stranded. All of them are still stranded out, and you can see them just about everywhere in Dornogal, mostly near the main big capital building where the faction leaders would be of the Earthern. Not only this, but Khadgar is also still alive, miraculously, after the ending of the Season 1 plotline of the War Within expansion. So at least not all is lost when it comes to the Kirin Tor, though the other leaders of Kirin Tor are still nowhere to be found. So this could potentially be a new breadcrumb quest that possibly links Valyria back with Khadgar and maybe Alleria. But that's about all we have so far, and for this breadcrumb in particular is just guesses, so I kind of want to pass it up to you guys in the comments. What would you want to see going forward with the Kirin Tor and the city of Dalaran? And where do you think this questline could potentially take us? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, I want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this update, and I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community to continue on the future discussion of potentially patch 11.1, or if you just want to discuss some of your theories with the rest of the community, definitely join our Discord channel. Also, let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.